This mismatch is often caused by changes in the economy, such as due to technology or shifts in consumer preferences, making certain skills obsolete or less in demand. For instance, let's consider the decline of the typewriter industry with the advent of computers. Skilled typists who were very proficient at using a typewriter might have found themselves structurally unemployed as the demand for their specific skill set, efficient use of the typewriter, dwindled due to technological advancements. This is because computers were much more efficient, much more accessible, and people could do the same job that typewriters could do at home by themselves. Another example could be seen in the decline of manufacturing jobs in certain regions. As manufacturing processes became more automated, companies may require fewer workers on the factory floor. This can lead to structural unemployment as individuals with specific skills to manual assembly or machine operations face challenges of finding relevant employment. In the modern context, rapid advancements in artificial intelligence and automation could potentially lead to structural employment for certain administrative roles, which do work that AI can easily replace. These include tasks like data entry or customer service, which AI, even at its current state, can likely handle, rendering these traditional jobs unnecessary. Structural unemployment underscores the importance of continuous skill development and adaptation to changing job markets. Individuals need to retain and acquire new skills to remain competitive in an evolving landscape and minimize the impact of structural shifts in the economy. Lastly, we have frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is likely the type of unemployment that most people will experience. It occurs when individuals are transitioning between jobs or entering the workforce for the first time. It's a natural and unavoidable aspect of a dynamic job market where people are constantly seeking better, higher paying jobs with better benefits, while employers are looking for better and better candidates. Imagine a recent college graduate entering the job market. They might experience frictional unemployment as they search for their first full-time position. During this time, they're looking for a job that aligns with their skills, interests, career goals, pay, and maybe it's even close to their house. This process of searching and applying and interviewing and negotiating tasks takes time and can result in temporary unemployment, which we refer to as frictional unemployment. Another example is when someone voluntarily leaves a job to pursue a new opportunity. They may experience frictional unemployment during the gap between leaving one job and starting their next job. This gap is often necessary to handle the logistics of transitioning, such as relocating or completing necessary paperwork. Frictional unemployment, while inevitable, can be reduced through effective job search strategies, networking, and the use of online job platforms. It's important to note that frictional unemployment is generally considered to be a healthy aspect of a dynamic job market, as it reflects the individual's ability to move and their flexibility in pursuing opportunities that best fit their skill sets and aspirations. So, inflation. When we're calculating GDP, as we learned earlier, the value of money changes over time. Money in the future is not worth the same as it is right now. As a result, GDP numbers, without being deflated, could show consistent growth, whereas in reality, the real GDP, which is what we refer to GDP with the time value of money taken into account, could be decreasing. As a result, to calculate the real GDP of a country, we take the nominal GDP, which is what would be reported, and we take away the impact of inflation. Okay, so who is really playing a role in the macroeconomy? So the two main players that control it are the governments and central banks, which implement and develop policies. And as a result, companies and consumers are impacted by these changes and need to react. So governments implement fiscal policy, whereas banks implement monetary policy. So first, what is monetary policy? Monetary policy involves a bank's management of a country's money supply and interest rates to influence economic activity. By adjusting interest rates and employing tools like open market operations, central banks can control inflation, encourage borrowing and spending during slow economic periods using expansionary monetary policy, or cool down an overheating economy using a contractionary monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy is when central banks reduce interest rates to make borrowing money easier for consumers. This is because the interest they would have to pay on a loan reduces, making taking a loan much more appealing. Contractionary monetary policy, on the other hand, is when central banks increase interest rates to make borrowing more expensive, causing borrowers to pay more interest on their loans, decreasing the appeal of these loans. An interesting example of monetary policy in action is Japan's use of interest rates to stimulate the economy. Typically, in a country that is using expansionary monetary policy, interest rates could be lowered from 3% to 2%, for example, to encourage borrowing. Japan, however, decided to take an unconventional approach. The Bank of Japan set an interest rate of negative 0.1. This is extremely unique and a choice made by Japan's government to meet their specific needs. This was their attempt to overcome deflation, which was a big issue in Japan. By making interest rates negative, it makes it more economical to borrow and spend money than just holding on to it. As a result, people kept taking on loans because it was generating that money, and as a result, they started spending more, which stimulated Japan's economy. And it has borne fruit for the country of Japan. Now, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy, it involves how governments use taxes and spending to influence the country's economy. By adjusting tax rates and government spending levels, governments aim to stimulate the economic growth during downturns using expansionary fiscal policy, or control inflation during periods of high growth using contractionary fiscal policy. So expansionary fiscal policy, similar to expansionary monetary policy, is when governments spend more money to increase the circulation of money within the circular flow of income, which creates jobs and more. Contractionary fiscal policy is when governments increase interest rates to decrease the disposable income of people to reduce their spendings. An example of how governments can spend their money is through investments in military, investments in infrastructure, or investments in social programs, which stimulate the economy and can be called injections. The ways they can influence tax rates are through increases or decreases in corporate tax and increases or decreases in individual tax, like income rates. Fiscal policy, as we mentioned earlier, can be expansionary to promote spending or contractionary to reduce spending. As you can assume, monetary policy, which is influenced by the central bank, is much more fast-acting than fiscal policy. Controlling interest rates is much faster than starting infrastructural projects, which can take years to see the effects of. Because interest rates can directly affect money circulation, they affect much faster. Whereas things like infrastructural projects, their benefits come from increased employment and injections into the economy in the form of available buildings where companies can relocate. This often takes time for companies to find these locations to relocate. And additionally, employment doesn't immediately increase the economy. In this section, we'll be going over ESG, or environment, social, and governance for short. ESG has become a topic of much concern in recent years especially, but has existed for hundreds of years and even beyond that. ESG is the social mission of a company and integrating social aspects and objectives within a company's goals. However, there is an increasing demand for ESG in the investing process from investors and stakeholders alike. However, there is so much skepticism regarding the role of ESG and responsible investing, and the idea that focusing on ESG means compromising returns. However, this isn't the case. In this section, we'll be going over what ESG is, why it's so important, and how investors should take into consideration ESG to not only advance social goals, but to ensure that their portfolios are profitable. All right, so first, what is ESG? ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, is a comprehensive framework that evaluates a company's performance and practices in three key areas. The environmental aspect focuses on how a company interacts with the planet, from how it goes about carbon emissions, to managing resources, to addressing waste and pollution. The social aspect revolves around relationships, including how a company treats its employees, fosters diversity and inclusion, and engages with local communities through initiatives and philanthropy, and CSR. Finally, the governance aspect examines a company's internal structure, ethics, and accountability. This encompasses everything from the composition of the board of directors to ensuring transparency, integrity, and adherence to regulations. ESG is more than just a trend. It's a strategic approach that considers the broader impact of business activities on the environment, society, and ethical practices. So the origin of ESG. Although ESG has become much more well-known with people outside the investing landscape in recent years, it's existed for so long. The origins of ESG can be traced back to the mid-20th century when discussions about corporate social responsibility started to take shape. However, it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s, fueled by social movements advocating for civil rights, that awareness of corporate impacts began to grow. This era saw the emergence of ethical investing, where investors excluded industries that conflicted with their own moral values. Global crises, including environmental disasters and financial meltdowns, further highlighted the urgent need for responsible business practices. In 2006, the United Nations took a significant step by launching the Principles for Responsible Investment, or PRI for short, signaling a formal commitment to integrating ESG considerations into investment decisions today. These historical milestones collectively paved the way for development and widespread adoption of ESG framework that we recognize today. Okay, so the importance of ESG. The significance of ESG lies in its ability to guide businesses towards long-term sustainability and success. By integrating environmental, social, and governance factors, companies not only reduce their environmental footprint, but also foster innovation and adapt to changing landscapes. ESG practices aren't just about doing good. They're about managing risks effectively. Identifying potential environmental and social vulnerabilities can shield a company from future disruptions. Moreover, a robust ESG strategy enhances a company's reputation, building credibility and trust with stakeholders. This is especially crucial in an era where consumers and investors expect more than just financial returns. Beyond reputation, ESG practices ensure regulatory compliance as standards evolve, demonstrating a commitment to ethical conduct and transparency. In essence, ESG is more than just a buzzword. It's a strategic imperative that not only ensures businesses thrive, but also contribute positively to the world around them. So, let's look at it in the modern investing lens. ESG has transformed the investment landscape by introducing a responsible approach to decision-making. Investors now factor ESG considerations when crafting their portfolios and align their investments with ethical and sustainable values. It's not just about these values, though. It's about potential financial benefits. ESG integration offers the promise of improved risk-adjusted returns, as companies with strong ESG practices often demonstrate resilience when faced with uncertainty. ESG-aligned companies also appeal to investors with a long-term outlook, as they prioritize sustainability in both environmental and self-sustainability and are better equipped to weather market fluctuations. Notably, research indicates that companies excelling in ESG performance can even outperform their peers financially. Beyond profit, ESG opens doors to impact investing, where investors actively contribute to positive societal and environmental changes through their investment choices. The integration of ESG factors signal a fundamental shift in how investors perceive value, emphasizing both financial returns and contributions to a more sustainable world. So, this is especially important in a modern world. With factors like social media, ESG has become even more important, and companies that fail to adopt ESG are placed under much more scrutiny, as we'll see in future examples, compared to companies who do adopt ESG. So, the impacts on stakeholders. ESG doesn't just affect a company's internal practices, it extends to its relationship with stakeholders. Employees, for instance, are more engaged and satisfied when they work for a company that prioritizes their well-being and supports a positive workplace culture through ESG practices. Customers, too, are drawn to brands that align with their own values, and ESG provides that connection. Companies with strong ESG values tend to attract and retain socially conscious customers, thus strengthening brand loyalty. Beyond employees and customers, ESG initiatives have a positive ripple effect on their local communities, contributing to societal well-being and forging deeper community connections.